from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff Barnett. Tonight, we're going to get the inside scoop on the future of the local economy, and we're talking with Dr. Stephen Fuller, who's the #1 expert on the local economy. And Doctor, it is a treat to have you on the show.
Very good to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Well,
for the last quarter century, Professor Stephen Fuller has been monitoring the local economy and publishing analyses and data on its health. He has been an advisor to the governors of Virginia, the last, I guess 5 of the last 6 governors, from Governor Wilder to Governor McAuliffe. He is a named chair at GMU. He's a director of the Center for Regional Analysis, and he's the chief economist for Cardinal Bank. So, Dr. Fuller, why don't we just start off with what's your snapshot? What's your assessment? Where is the local economy? What kind of shape are we in?
it's struggling. It's interesting that the effects of reduced federal spending, this sequester which took effect in March of 2013, really brought the economy to its knees. It actually contracted in 2013. It doesn't feel this way. Nobody noticed it, but it was in worse shape in 13 than it was during the recession.
Now, again, are you talking about the nation as a whole?
No,
or just
the
this
Washington
area?
metro area, it actually contracted. And it wasn't just the metro area. It was the Commonwealth of Virginia, the District of Columbia, and Maryland. They ranked at the bottom of all of the states. 48th, Virginia ranked in the country in terms of economic performance, Maryland 49th. The district was, had it been a state, 51st. And yet we didn't actually feel it. And it was that the economy seemed to be growing because we were adding jobs. The big difference, as we'll talk about later, I'm sure, is that the kinds of jobs we were adding paid a lot less than the kinds of jobs we're losing. So there was an internal churn that became less and less favorable. We're still struggling with recovery from that.
And do you see this kind of struggle continuing for the next year or two, or do you see
I think it's going to continue into the next decade. And the reason is that we were so dependent on federal spending. And it got cut off. 2010 was the peak. And between 2010 and 2014, dramatic reductions. We lost 21,000 federal jobs, and we're not done. And the federal contracting base shrank. To replace that with non-federally dependent work just takes a long time to start up new businesses or shift the business base of the federal contractors to non-federal work. Takes time. Fortunately, we have a strong base that can be shifted. It isn't like Detroit, that when the auto industry crashed, there was nothing that you could do that built out of the auto industry. Here we're building out of a very smart workforce, very strong corporate base. It just has to learn some new tricks.
Well, when you say for the next decade, or could be for the next decade, that's a long way for an economist to look out, isn't it?
Well, I said to the next decade, so I'm going to 2020, which is only 4.5 years from now. But our forecast, typically you'll have long-range forecasts that going to 2030 seems like a long way. It's not very far right now. The demographic trends are pretty predictable. Births and deaths and migration. Migration changes a little bit, but the nature of the economy doesn't shift nationally or globally that fast. It's when something in it crashes. And we're a company town, and our main line of business stopped growing. And we haven't finished the adjustment. It's going to take some time for that. Other way. Yeah.
Okay, slide number 2, if you could, please. When you talk about the economy, I think.
Yeah, there you go, right there.
Yeah.
Good.
As I was looking at these data before the show, I was struck by the second half of the data that showed that from '08 to 10, information and financial really took hits in our area, and they really haven't recovered. But can you talk about this slide in general?
This slide's really important. First, it spans from when these are all private sectors. There's no government shown here because the government sector isn't the future. The private sector is the future, at least as the stimulant of growth. And so here we are looking at all of the losses, 181,000 jobs we lost during the recession. And we've replaced all of them now in number. But not in same kind. And so you can look at education and human services here, where we didn't lose any jobs at all in education and health services, and we've actually added 62,000 jobs over this full period from '08 through the current period. Says something about our economy. Right. We have a bunch of old people and we have a bunch of young people. Old people need health services, and it's going to continue that way. That sector didn't lose jobs nationally either. These jobs, the fastest growing sector in that subsector is home health care services. These are not doctors, they're not RNs, they're not LPNs. These are people that come to your house and sit with you in your old age, or maybe help you go shopping. They're not paid very well.
Right.
It's not a fun job, I would imagine. And then you look at financial services. We lost 10,000 jobs and we only added 4,000 back. This is banking. That's consolidation. Machines are replacing people. That's the real estate sector as well. It's your venture capitalists. This is a very high value added sector. These jobs, they generate great value in the economy. Several $100,000 per job.
Right.
And so we've lost jobs that pay well, and we're adding jobs that don't pay so well. Leisure and hospitality, 51,000 new jobs. Most of them are food service workers. We're all eating out in fast food or not high-end restaurants, but even those don't pay that well.
Right.
And so there's an enormous shift, and when you add up the value of these jobs, the ones we lost and the ones we gained, now here we are, we're 42,400 jobs ahead of where we were back in the beginning of the recession, but we're still behind in value. We're $6.9 billion, almost $7 billion lost in the economy.
So again, just talking about the obvious here, just looking at this chart from '08 until 2 months ago, March of 15, in constant dollars. We lost initially 180,000 jobs. We've gained back 223,000 jobs for a net gain of 42,000. But the 42,000 new jobs generate $6 billion less in terms of income.
That's right. So our economy would have been almost $7 billion bigger had we added back the same kind of jobs we lost and just ended up with no growth.
And another little footnote there, devil's in the details. The jobs that we lost paid $160,000 a year. The jobs that we have created pay less than $100,000 a year.
These are not really what they pay, it's what they contribute to the economy. So it's salary, overhead, fringe benefits, profit, and all the other benefits. But you got to generate more value than they pay you.
Right.
Or you go out of business. So this is the private sector, not government, remember?
And you don't see this changing?
It's a national phenomenon that the average wage, the average household income, all of these they've declined the last 3 years in a row. There's a major shift going on, and it's partly because of the recession. Companies tightened down, they had to stay in business. They found ways to do their work with lower paid workers. They got rid of the middle income or the middle managers. Anything that was done in a routine fashion has been replaced by machinery, by robots. You can see it on the factory floor today and just go to an auto assembly plant.
So even if you brought back As people talk about bringing back manufacturing jobs in the United States, what they're bringing back is robotic jobs, actually.
They'd be very high-paid jobs, but not a whole lot of them.
Right.
You know, it's a fundamental shift, just like we went through a fundamental shift when we mechanized the first time 150 years ago, and with electricity. But now it's that we're in a global economy and we have to be competitive. And you know how much, or can find out how much anything costs by going online. Right. And most people do their homework, and they're being very careful with their money because they don't have a surplus. They don't expect to make a lot more money next year than this year, so they're saving more money. They're being more careful, and there's almost no excess profit, so they can't pay people more than they're worth.
So we're looking for the next big thing then, right?
Well, I think this is the next. This is what it's going to be. It's going to be a lean economy for quite a long time.
Will there be sectors within that economy that may not be as lean as others?
Of course.
And what could they be?
Well, they're usually correlated pretty strongly with education, and it would be easy just to say those sectors that have that are in the sciences and technology are going to be well paid. Then it'll be certainly much better paid. The average salary in professional and business services, where most of the technical jobs are, but also the lawyers and accountants are in this region are around $100,000. Sounds like a lot of money. Doesn't buy $1 million house or a $500,000 house. Now, but it's a whole lot better than a food service worker who might make $30,000 a year.
But it's not going to be in the federal sector. Federal jobs. Federal
jobs pay the most on average in this region, about $130,000, because they've outsourced all the low-paying jobs, more or less. But you can see by this graphic that we've lost almost 22,000 federal jobs since the peak in mid-2010. The forecasts are that we'll lose at least 15,000 more. We've had this cycle before.
And that's just in this area?
Just in the metro area. So it's more than Fairfax County, more than Northern Virginia, the district, and suburban Maryland. And then we've lost a lot of federal contract jobs too.
So with actually the highest average paying jobs are federal in this area, and that's where we're taking some of the biggest cuts. This is a fascinating conversation. I'm Jeff Barnett. We're talking with Dr. Stephen Fuller, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
This year, 28,000 Americans will be diagnosed with oral cancer. Every year, 7,000 Americans die of oral cancer.
I'm Eva Cohen, and I'm an oral cancer survivor. I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer, no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty. But one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
Here again, your host.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. I'm talking with Dr. Stephen Fuller. We're talking about the future of the economy in the local area. And if you watched the first part of the show, you've seen that Dr. Fuller certainly knows his business. By the way, he has a BA in economics from Rutgers, and his doctorate is out of Cornell. He was on the faculty at George Washington University for 25 years. And has now been on the faculty at George Mason for another
21.
I guess you can't hold a job, is that it? We were talking about fundamental shifts to the economy, and one of the ways that really shows itself is in the housing market, right? So how do you see, what kind of advice are you giving to people about whether or not to buy, whether or not to sell, whether or not to rent? Where do you see the local housing market as a whole going?
Well, first, I try not to give advice. People wouldn't probably pay attention to me anyway, but I do try to describe the situation. And because of this dilution of household incomes due to the mix of jobs changing and lower wages, it certainly helps explain why the rental market has been so strong in recent years, and that most of the housing, the majority of the new housing being built today is rental, and it's multifamily high-rise.
And that reflects then the types of incomes that people are getting and the change in income that we've seen both in Fairfax and the surrounding counties, right?
And it shows also that people that are in their houses are saying, well, I really can't afford to trade up because I don't expect my income to grow. And my house that I'm in isn't so bad anyway. And I've just refinanced it and I have a 3.5% mortgage or whatever the rate is. It's lower than they ever had remembered in history. And so they're getting locked into their houses. And so there's typically new houses, single-family detached houses that we see in the suburbs, are purchased by people who are here already and they're trading up from their older house and they're making that older house available to somebody who'd been a renter. So we keep plugging people into the rental stock, and there's not very much place for them to go if they wanted to buy, because we're not building less expensive houses. We need to, but we're not. And we're waiting for the old people to get out of their houses and maybe move into a rental or a nursing home, or move to Florida to make their house available. So the housing market is, the resale market's okay. Prices have come back from the recession almost fully in Fairfax and Arlington, Alexandria. But it's somewhat stuck at the top right now. And we don't think that's going to break loose until the millennials, who are pushing 35, 36 at the top end and who have been renters for a long time, get tired of renting. And they've also maybe taken on a spouse and a child and they've outgrown their unit. So this is a somewhat self-correcting problem, but it won't be for 3 or 4 more years.
And is that true at all kind of price points in the market?
Well, there's a great demand for houses for less than $400,000. The problem is we don't have any. We have a lot of condos, but that isn't what the renters are looking for, because that's what they have actually been occupying, a flat or a 1,000 square foot to 1,200 square foot unit. They're looking for something a little bit bigger and affordable. The problem is bigger isn't affordable in this housing market. And it's one of the constraints for business growth. Businesses are growing around the country. Our peer metropolitan areas are booming. But they tend, other than New York City and San Francisco, which are booming, they tend to most metropolitan areas have lower housing costs than we do.
Can we put those two thoughts together then? If a lot of the job growth is in the lower paying jobs, and we don't have, in this area, we don't have housing stock that's compatible with those lower rate salaries, then you're going to have stagnation in job creation and business creation in this area. Is that what?
It's possible. I think this isn't a rut that you can't get out of. And we are adding jobs, added 52,000 jobs in the last year. I mean, they're starting to grow. A lot of them are still moderate or below average salary jobs, but as they begin to grow, we're getting some more higher wage jobs too. And so while this isn't totally self-correcting, it will improve. You can see here that during 2014, of the top largest 15 metropolitan areas, we performed the worst. I tell people they don't like to hear this, that Detroit generated more jobs than we did.
But New York also has high costs. Los Angeles has high costs. There's a lot of, San Francisco certainly has high costs. I mean, there's a lot of high cost areas there.
Well, they also had a more diversified economy. They didn't have an economy that was 40% federal. So you have to think of this as really a company town. Los Angeles, New York are global business centers. And we may never be like them, but we will become more like them. We are moving towards that slowly as our federal contractor base, which grew so rapidly over the last 30 years, is finding ways to do business in the business market, in the private sector, or they don't survive. But these are smart companies, and they are looking to diversify. It takes a while to learn how to do that.
You know, a few years ago, there was a lot of talk in this area that we were moving away from being just a one-company town. And you had things like Capital One and AOL. You had financial and internet-type-based companies that were doing well here, and their owners were, buying sports teams, for example. But AOL, imploded and then restructured, and now it's selling itself. I guess we're back to being a company town. Is that?
Well, we never really weren't a company town. There's been some variation at the top. By 2010, that was the peak of being federally dependent. So 2000, at the time before the tech bubble burst in 2000, we were appearing to be less federally dependent. I think it was a false impression, largely. People saw all this private sector development, the development of large companies here, and they didn't know what they were doing here. They were here doing federal business. So we did grow the private sector dramatically in the 90s, and right up to the recession in 2000 into 2007, dramatic private sector growth. But it was largely on the back of Uncle Sam. We had a rich uncle, tax money was coming into this region like mad, and it was actually building off of a process that dates back 20 years. We're doing a little bit better. This slide shows how we did in March, the most recently available data, March of this year compared to a year ago. We moved up a little bit. We are still being outperformed by Detroit, but Boston, I have to remember Boston had 109 inches of snow, and so they weren't able to, they couldn't be open long enough to hire a bunch of people. Chicago was really cold and miserable. Philadelphia wasn't much better and has some of its own problems. And so, some of this monthly data does get impacted by weather conditions. We're still struggling, but we did 0.6% growth last year. In the March to March timeframe, 1.6. So we're accelerating. So it's getting down to the quality of jobs now.
Well, what kind of jobs in these other areas, Miami, Dallas, Minneapolis, what kind of jobs are they generating? Are they generating high-skilled, high-wage jobs, or again, is it at the lower end?
It's a more diversified base, so that they find financial services maybe growing more strongly, certainly in New York and in the big commercial cities, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Manufacturing is a significant part of their economy, and it's doing well. And in Houston and Dallas have been doing quite well, and that wasn't just on oil drilling. They were making rigs, they were doing refining, they were designing refineries, petrochemicals more broadly. The decrease in exploration because of lower oil prices has hurt them. They've lost 30,000 jobs in the last couple of months. They'll rebound from that as oil prices go back up over the next couple of years. But they're much more diversified. Minneapolis, they manufacture a lot of stuff there. There's also
3M.
But it's that they're diversified. We're running on we have this big team of horses. We only have 2 that are pulling right now, and they have 7 or 8, and they're just able to run faster than we are. So, it's the problem of betting on a single horse or maybe a horse and a half.
When you say we have 2 horses, what are they? Again.
Well, let's go to the next picture and we'll look at this here. This is what the economy did. I misspoke. It was only 50,700, but this is a really good performance. And we can see professional business services. That's our largest sector. It added 13,000 jobs. These are jobs that on average pay close to $100,000 apiece. These are legal, accounting, management, a lot of consulting. This is a sector that had federal government been buying goods and services like they used to, had the federal procurement been growing, this would have been 26,000. So this is devoid of federal influence. These are almost all non-federally supported jobs. These are office jobs. The education and health services still growing strongly. So Inova is making a play. They're adding, they're expanding, they're creating new research facilities. That shows up in some of these. The universities, we have over 100. We have at least 104. I've identified colleges and universities in the Washington area. 400,000 college students. This is big business, and most of them aren't from here. A lot of them are here, but many of them are coming from other places, bringing their parents' money and spending in our economy. So it's like an export. The retail, trade, leisure and hospitality, construction. This is a reasonably good growth. Problem is the bottom of our economy, the smaller sectors, very high value added, like wholesale trade and manufacturing, information services, financial services. They're either contracting or almost not growing. So until we fill out the bottom of our economy, I say bottom, the smaller sectors, until we get them adding in, since their jobs are worth a lot. Yeah, one of those jobs is equal to 2 or 3 in retail in terms of value and salary. So we have to work on expanding our base, and Fairfax County's been working at that, attracting new businesses. It's easy to name Hilton and Volkswagen, but those kinds of businesses that come here because it's a good place to do business. It's a good place to do business from. We're connected to the world here. Right. We have every foreign consulate in the world here. It's a good place to do business, and more and more companies are recognizing that and moving to Fairfax.
I'm Jeff Barnett. You're watching The Inside Scoop. I'm talking with Dr. Stephen Fuller from George Mason and the Center for Regional Analysis. We're talking about the local economy, and we will be back in 2 minutes. Thank you.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library. Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know. There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800-RUNAWAY.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett, and we're getting the inside scoop from Dr. Stephen Fuller on the future of the economy and where our local area is going. Just before the break, we were talking about spin-offs from universities, and it occurred to me that Montgomery County, Maryland, was very famous for biotech. That was supposed to be the next big engine, was supposed to create a lot of jobs, a lot of wealth. Don't hear much about it anymore.
Well, you can hear more about it. I think what happened in the biotech industry, really simply, is that Montgomery County had a number of what became very successful research-based technology firms. And the big pharmaceutical companies were having difficulty. It's very expensive to bring a drug to market. Right. And they decided it was just easier to go buy companies who already had a successful drug. And so they were snapping up what we were producing. But as we think about biotech, if you think of it more broadly as maybe bioservices or biohealth services, and think of it not just as the technology company, but the Inova or the Adventist, the Children's Hospital in DC, and then FDA. We have all the regulatory activity. Yeah, they're the ones that who approve drugs, and all the lawyers that help do that. Right. It's a much more non-medical oriented professional services industry. We have bioterrorism businesses here. George Mason University has a center in bioterrorism. We have very sophisticated research labs now showing up. NIH. The rehabilitation. We have companies that are designing prosthetics, and who can build bionic arms, in effect. These are things that were on television 20 years ago, and we thought they were pretty amazing, but they're real world now. And so the biomedical services industry is much broader. Montgomery County has a piece of it, but Northern Virginia, bioinformatics and personalized medicine, genomics, whatever this comes out to be, you're going to be able to be diagnosed, while you're sitting in the front seat of your car holding your horn or something. The application of the technology we're really good at here, that's in effect built out of the Defense Department research and the contracting industry, is being applied to health services. And the Washington area is one of the parts of the country that specializes in this. So it's taking a much different form than we would have thought as we look back 20 years.
But are there other parts of the country that are ahead of us in that or equal to us in that? I mean, when I think about IT, I think about Silicon Valley. When I think about cars, I think about Detroit. When I think about finance, I think about Boston and New York.
Well, you could say Johns Hopkins by itself. It's the biggest business. It's the engine of the Baltimore regional economy. But it's big. We have more software engineers in Washington than Silicon Valley, but we apply we apply technology to problem solving. Where in Silicon Valley they're inventing.
So we're engineers and.
So we're different. We're in the application business. In fact, there are a lot more jobs in applying technology to problem solving in the broadest sense than there is in making the initial software. So this isn't a bad end of the business to be on. This is the broad base of the pyramid in a sense. And it's the one that we need to trade on. We can't be Silicon Valley. We don't have that cultural environment that creates that kind of lifestyle or the kind of entrepreneurialism that evolves there. We have different kind of entrepreneurs here.
And we also have and you were talking about this during the break, we also have a wealth of universities here. And when we think about the renaissance going on in Pittsburgh today, that's driven primarily by University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon. We think about the Boston area with its universities. You just mentioned Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Well, we've got some extraordinary universities right here. Another example, Austin, Texas, Charlottesville. So university-driven economic growth is one of the paradigms of this era. And when you put that together with what you were talking about before in terms of the biomeds, it would seem like that would be a huge opportunity for the future in this area. The only question is, how do we get there from here?
Well, they're doing it. It just takes a while. University of Maryland, Georgetown, GW, American University, Catholic University, and George Mason together have about 150,000 students. Enormous faculty. Each one has about 3,000 or 4,000 faculty. Enormous engine. But besides the economic impacts of those as businesses, we think of them really, they have big payroll, the students spend a lot of money. Most important is their ability to attract and retain students that grow up, graduate, and stay here and work. And so the ability to businesses go where the qualified workforce is located. Businesses move to capture the workforce. And so by having the ability to create a smart workforce, we brag here that we have the best educated workforce in the country, adult population. By years completed in college, if that's the measure you might use, we are the best educated workforce in the country. We have the highest labor force participation rates among women in the country. The men is about average for a metropolitan area. But what's interesting, our workers work longer here. We have the highest participation rate of workers over 65 because the kind of work we do, brain work, as opposed to muscle in your arm work, manufacturing and lifting, the brain work actually continues, and the experience and the value of your senior, or call it the encore worker, is been found to be very attractive to businesses. And so we're different than other places, and I'm going to see that feed into our resurgence.
And so do we simply, kind of sit back and wait for the market to self-correct and to create these jobs, or is there things that we as a community should be doing?
We can't afford to wait because we're being lapped. And this is a race, and we have a business cycle in this country. We don't know when the next downturn's going to come, but the longest business cycle we've ever had is 10 years. And that includes the downturn. So we're already from 07 to 15. That's simple math is 8 years. We're approaching the end of what would be a logical business cycle. I think this one's going to be a little bit longer because we don't have any distortions in the economy yet.
Do you think that business cycles in the information age are roughly comparable to what they were in the industrial age?
No. Well, what has affected this is human behavior. And the average length of the 12 recessions since World War II is 4.5 years. And we just had a lot of ups and downs and easy distortions. Well, in a way you may be correct in that we have better information, and so we're not acting on false information as easily as people used to do. They didn't know to save at some point because they thought the curve would only go up. And we know the curve is now a much more gradual curve. Saving rates are up. People are being very careful. They're protecting themselves against uncertainty. They're renting instead of buying, when before they might have gone out on the limb and bought and taken the risk. They're keeping their cars longer, or they're not buying a car at all. So I think, and nations are being more careful about taking on debt. They've been cutting debt. So this is likely to go on for a little while longer.
But we also knew how to, at least we thought we knew how to ameliorate the effects of a recession in the industrial age, because we figured that all we had to do was kind of help people get through it, and then the factory that in their local town would eventually start hiring again and they'd be back in business. Well, but that's not the case anymore.
Well, had the intervention that was taken back in 08 and 09 not been taken, it would have been a much worse recession than we had. And when it was the worst recession we had since the Great Depression, turned out it wasn't enough of an intervention, because nobody realized how big a hole we were in. Now, this is Northern Virginia precisely, and you can see the federal government still shrinking, federal employment. Again, the smaller sectors are very weak or contracting, and there's only 2 sectors that are showing any oomph at all, and that's business and professional services. That's a good thing. Education and health services. So it's a 2-horse town. In a good year, Fairfax County would add 25,000 jobs. And here, this is all of Northern Virginia.
Is that historically or going back?
Well, that's I'm picked a good year. That would have been in 03, 04,
Okay.
or 90, 96, 7, that period.
Okay.
And here we have, this is 6 independent cities and 10 counties is Northern Virginia. This includes Spotsylvania County and Fredericksburg and Culpeper and
Loudoun
Warren.
and
yeah, I mean, this is a big, and we're only doing 16,000. So this isn't very comforting, given the potential we have for growth. But at least we have 2 strong sectors. We need to have 6.
What do you tell Governor McAuliffe? Because if Northern Virginia is one of the engines of the state economy, what kind of cards are they going to be dealing with in Richmond over these next couple of years?
Well, I think you have to credit Governor McAuliffe. He got the message before he ran. Now, I did have a conversation. He invited me in and we talked, but he knew this. But he gives me credit every once in a while for telling him. But he knew this, that we couldn't sit back and wait for defense spending to increase. We had to reduce our dependency, and that's his message wherever he goes. And he's the world's greatest salesman, I think. He's out selling the state and trying to attract investment. And you get his numbers. I don't look at the numbers and know exactly what they mean, but he's working day and night to diversify the economy, and most particularly to go around the state and saying, the solution in Danville isn't the same as Hampton, isn't the same as Fairfax. You need to know what you're good at. Build on your strength and take advantage of your special assets and grow that, and not try to be what the other guy is. And so, unfortunately, you can't do this in 4 years. But the state's doing much better than it was, and the good measure of that is that you remember just a year ago we were looking at a $2 billion shortfall in revenues,
right?
And all of a sudden the revenues have begun to pick up a little bit. They adjusted the budget. And the revenue forecast the revenue collected in April was above expectation. And I just hope they don't think that's maybe a long-term trend. You got 1 month isn't a trend. But the state's doing better.
Well, that's good news to hear. Again, I'm Jeff Barnett. You're watching The Inside Scoop. We're here talking with Dr. Stephen Fuller from George Mason University. If you want any more information on any of his data, cra.gmu.edu. And we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them. Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
my son,
my sister-in-law
were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can. Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America. Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett, again talking with Dr. Stephen Fuller from George Mason University and the Center for Regional Analysis, and we're talking about the future of the local economy. First, I want to talk about a snippet that came out from the PBS NewsHour. Mark Shields talking about how U.S. gross domestic product doubled in the last 20 years, while median household income for America writ large went down. Do you think that that data is correct, number one? And then number two, does it apply to our area?
Well, the 17.1 trillion is about correct. What I don't know is if the 8.8 is actually in constant dollars. But the economy has grown steadily over this 20 years. And what it tells us is that that workers are, because they work differently than they did 20 years ago. You think about how much technology we had. Most people didn't have laptops 20 years ago.
Right.
We did, email was out there and home computers were out there, but they weren't universal.
Right.
And so we worked differently.
Mobile devices weren't, you know.
And a lot of jobs that were very valuable jobs in the economy, paying a good wage, have been eradicated because we've replaced them by machines. Just go into your neighborhood bank. When have you been into a bank recently? And we have ATMs. Right. And so an ATM creates value for the bank, but it doesn't create income for workers. And we can look around. Our cars are different. The way work is done. And so we're growing an economy with fewer workers. Our workforce is smaller today, the number of people working in many sectors, but our total labor force is shrinking. That's a worldwide problem in developed countries. But the value of their work has gone up, and it isn't showing up in wages. And so this is a very troubling trend.
So I have a brilliant nephew. What kind of advice should I give him? What kind of fields should, if he wants to stay in this area, what kind of fields should he be looking towards?
Well, I hope your nephew has good mathematical skills, good analytical skills. So jobs that use the brain are going to outlast the jobs that depend on muscle. They pay much better. And you can work much longer. Yeah. And I think work can be very satisfying. So cognitive skills and problem-solving skills are important. But there's lots of fields that can prepare you for that kind of work. But having entrepreneurial skills will help too.
You know, when I look at your resume, you are not only an academician, you're an entrepreneur. You have started things that generate revenue. In fact, you funded some of your graduate students through some of the grants that you've been able to partner with industry. So the ability to not only to find a job, but to create a job, that type of entrepreneurship seems to be one of the shifts, whether, for many of us is unwelcome, but it seems to be one of the shifts that's going on in today's workforce. I don't know if you agree with that.
It is, and it seems like the millennials, those folks who are basically still in college and running out through about 35 years old now, have a lot of entrepreneurial juice. And that may end up on Main Street as a retailer. Yeah. It may not end up in a laboratory, but they seem to enjoy work as well as play.
Now, part of my question was, what should I tell them for staying in the local area? But how do you think our area is going to perform versus the rest of the country?
Well, in our analysis of the economy, the way its composition and the projected growth rates of what we're good at show that over the next 5 years that it will accelerate from the hole it was in 13.
The U.S. economy as a whole.
I'm talking about this is the local economy,
okay,
is going to outperform the U.S. economy by the end of this decade. It's underperformed the U.S. economy over the last 3 years, but it's going to pick up speed if we do it won't do it automatically. It needs some help. And part of that is to understand why the pieces of it that have growth potential, high value added, high growth potential sectors, why they're not growing as fast as their potential suggests. They're growing in other places. That's how we measure their potential. If what we do here is growing very fast in Los Angeles, but not here, well, why is that? And so we look at what are the disincentives. Could be the regulatory environment, could be the tax environment. It could be that we don't have a well-trained workforce. These are all correctable. Sometimes companies have to do it themselves. Could be our transportation congestion. That's a hard one to solve. It could be the fact that we have a region that has 22 counties in it and has 3 states and crosses rivers. No other jurisdiction, metropolitan area in the country is as complex as this one. And it has a federal government that doesn't seem to be very interested in the economic welfare. They used to be. In the federal government, we wouldn't have had Metro. It had been the federal government picking up 70% of the construction costs and being the unifying factor that got the jurisdictions together to help fund it back in the early 60s. But we don't.
Dulles Airport.
Dulles Airport. We don't have a federal government that seems interested in the welfare. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. You know, Richard Nixon, we might think of him differently, but he was a very strong supporter of the economy and of the health of this region, and certainly Lyndon Johnson was too. And it was this was the capital city.
Yeah, cleaning up Pennsylvania Avenue was a Kennedy administration.
So we don't get much attention out of Congress, and there's things that Congress do to make life more complicated in Washington for businesses, not just D.C., but the whole region.
But regardless, the way I understood you before, you said that you think that through the rest of this decade, this area will outperform the rest of the nation.
We will catch up and surpass the nation as we move towards it.
And that's without doing any changes.
Well,
is that right?
The models show that we have the potential to do that. Now, whether we can realize that potential without any assistance. You know, government's here working all the time to try to improve the quality of the business climate. Virginia tends to rank pretty high in the country. Maryland does at times as well. Not quite as high because they have higher tax burdens. At least that's what the common knowledge seems to say.
But we also have the best educated workforce.
That's what they
that
say.
Takes money.
So. Slow learners, maybe, but but still, you know, we have the Fairfax County works very hard to promote itself, and we have to maybe rebrand ourselves a little bit so we're not viewed by the rest of the world as just the center of a dysfunctional government, but this is actually a high-quality business environment, and we have a lot of Fairfax County has over 300 or 400 foreign-owned companies. They're the only county I know that knows how many foreign-owned companies they have. And what do they do here? You know, how do we promote more of that in this region? So I think some regional cooperation, so we're not always fighting each other and stealing from each other, would help the region as well. We have work to do.
And some of those companies are kind of government-related, BAE, for example. But others, like Volkswagen, are not.
Well, you know, these government-related companies are looking for non-government work or non-federal work. So many of them have looked to the state and local governments and foreign governments. So they're still doing government work, but many of them are going into corporate work as well.
Dulles Airport is the last airport on the East Coast with expansion capacity. It can build another runway.
It can, and it's underutilized now.
Right, and no other area can do that. That is a that combined with possibly the most fiber-rich dirt on Earth around here, plus the biomed that we were talking about before, plus the universities, plus the immediate access to the regulatory environment, all of those put together would seem to make this place ready to just take off again.
Well, Fairfax is better positioned than some other jurisdictions because of the Silver Line and the expansion, the express lanes.
Are you an advocate of that? You think that has a positive
I did the economic impact study for the Silver Line extension into Loudoun County, and it's going to be a bonanza. But it will be a bonanza at the expense of some of the counties that don't have as good transportation. The addition of the 4 lanes to the Beltway also, and the proposed expansion of 66. There's lots of improvements going on that help Northern Virginia compete against the district in suburban Maryland. It doesn't grow the totality of this region. It just repositions a lot of it in favor of us, in a sense. We can say that's good, but we got to grow the whole region or we'll fail.
There's only one other thing I wanted to talk about, and we only have about a minute left, but unemployment. This is unemployment, but it's not underemployment. Are you pretty confident with these numbers, and do you see these trends holding firm the next 2-3 years?
I think they're going to go down a little bit more. You can see where we came from. And in Fairfax, this is for Northern Virginia, Fairfax at one point was at 1.8%. Hard to believe that.
Right. That's.
But there's a little. This isn't telling the full story. And we have a lot of part-time workers that want to be full-time workers. We have people that have dropped out of the workforce because they're discouraged and aren't counted as unemployed workers. So we do not have a labor shortage at this point, and we don't have price or income, salary pressure. There's no wage inflation. So we have plenty of workers.
How do economists factor in underemployment? There's a lot of people watching this show who would like to work, but they can't find a job, and they've dropped out, and they're not really counted anymore because they've stopped looking.
Or they're working at jobs that they're overqualified for, so they're misplaced in the workforce. Hard to count that one. The census, or excuse me, the Department of Labor does have another number. These are the regular unemployment numbers, but they do have another unemployment number that factors in the number of workers who want to work full-time who are part-time, and you can calculate the dropouts. So this is probably closer to 8%. This is probably half of the true unemployment number.
Okay, if you have one of your smart PhD candidates, that would be a great thesis if they could solve that problem. Understanding the underemployment dynamic, and then how to ameliorate it, how to make it.
We have a large number of workers who have 2 half-time jobs to equal a full-time job, and that doesn't pay as much combined. They may not have any fringe benefits. It's not the answer, but it's a much different workforce than we had back 20 years ago.
Dr. Fuller, it's been a marvelous conversation. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Again, cra@gmu.edu is the source for all the data and information. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Good night.
Very good, guys.
Okay.